It's time for Blue Whites Illustrated's post-game show. Penn State beats Auburn 28-20. He's Nate Bauer. I'm Greg Pickel. BWI.Rivals.com for all the latest news from Beaver Stadium. Nate, Penn State comes out and pretty much in some ways did everything it wanted to against Auburn. In some ways wasn't able to necessarily close the game out the way it wanted to, but this was a good performance against a good football team, I thought.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I personally thought Auburn was better than maybe I anticipated them being. Like, that was a physical, tough clash of a game.
Yes.
Like, for both sides. I mean, if anything, my biggest takeaway was, yo, those two teams are like good football teams.
Right.
Like, that was a good football game.
Yep.
Not just from an entertainment factor, but like actually quality in every facet of the game. Obviously, Auburn had some issues hanging on to the football tonight.
Yep.
And honestly, proved to be the difference.
Right.
It really was.
Yep.
But past that, you know, Sean Clifford, maybe his best game as a Penn State player.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the offensive line handled itself very well against a tough defensive front. And defensively, I thought that Penn State did everything that it wanted, you know, or needed to really do against running backs that are excellent. Those guys are legit.
Yes.
And so to come out of this with a win tonight, you know, I think it bodes fairly well for Penn State moving forward.
I don't think they will see a better running back, and definitely not a better running back tandem than what we just saw here from Auburn. Tanks Bigsby, he earned his nickname. I mean, he runs over people. He ran around people.
Yep.
And, you know, Bo Nix is bad. We knew that. I mean, and look, that he's not the one that had the fumble that basically lost Auburn the game, but he also could not do much of anything when given the opportunity to do something. And, you know, that fade play was just incredible to me.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Penn State kept him uncomfortable. We talked about it a lot in the lead up to this, that if you're Penn State, you have to rush him. You have to make him uncomfortable. You can't let him get into a rhythm. Penn State never did for 4 quarters.
Yeah. No, they tried it. Penn State brought the house a few times.
Yep.
But and Arnold Ebiketie was close multiple times to getting the Knicks. But I mean, you look at the stat line at the end of the game. Neither team had a sack, which is honestly remarkable for both of these defensive lines against both of these offensive lines. We thought that the offensive lines were kind of maybe the weak points or the lesser points when looking at those matchups. So, you know, they protected their quarterbacks. Their quarterbacks made plays. They kept plays alive. You know, and being able to get through that and, you know, honestly generate a win, I thought it was a pretty good showing for Penn State tonight.
It was. I guess we probably shouldn't go too much further without addressing the officiating part of this game, which was just not very good. It didn't matter. It'll become a footnote, not a headline, because Penn State ultimately does win this game. But it was an SEC crew. The assumption is that there will be a Big Ten crew at Auburn next year when they go to Jordan-Hare, so that explains that. But these guys just weren't any good. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, you know, James Franklin tells us that they all were convinced that it was fourth down in the first half when Sean Clifford had the intentional grounding, and it should have been 3rd and 11, and they were convinced it was 4th and 11. There was the P.J. Mustafa play where they didn't really let forward progress play out. There were some other ones that just head scratchers. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I mean, both intentional groundings I thought were.
Or you know, the one they didn't call, right on Nick's.
They called one, they didn't call the other. You know, just inconsistent. The thing to me, look, refereeing crews, officiating crews have bad nights. That happens.
Right.
How do you lose it down? That's just
that's just inexcusable.
Because you've got 10 different eyes, 10 different sets of eyes.
Plus one up there in the press box.
Right. Like there are so many ways to ensure that doesn't happen.
Correct.
That the fact that it did happen, you know, I mean, look, I don't think that there's any doubt that James Franklin left that game feeling as though Penn State actually went 2-0 because they managed to beat Auburn and an officiating crew that maybe the targeting call Auburn might not like, but certainly it looked like the right call.
Right.
Like, was there a call that really seemed like Auburn got the short end of the stick? I don't think so.
No, they're going to argue maybe at the end of the game, pass interference on Jaquan Brisker. They're going to make that argument. I think they're also going to make it on the play. I believe it was the play before, or maybe it was the fade. But I didn't really see enough. There was contact on that last play. I don't think there's any question. I didn't think it was enough for pass interference. That's really the only one they can gripe about, though, and I don't think they have a lot to gripe about. So we don't need to beat a dead horse because it's dead.
Well, and honestly, like, I thought it was a play of the game that is not going to be considered a play of the game.
Right.
But the pass interference that Jahan Dotson drew.
Yep.
And you know, that was the right call, obviously. It was so obvious that I'm not sure that you couldn't call it. But that was a critical play to have that called. Get the ball out of their own end zone.
Yep.
Moved it, you know, to whatever it was, the 15, 20-yard line.
Yep.
That really changed the complexion of those final couple of minutes where I think maybe Penn State fans in Penn State are much more nervous for those last 40 seconds. That would have probably been a minute and 40 seconds had that not played out the way that it did.
Yeah, so Penn State now 3-0. You can read all about it at bwi.rivals.com. YouTube.com/Blue White Illustrated is where you find YouTube. T. Frank is live right now as you and I are standing here talking.
You're already watching this. So.
You're watching one show. You can watch another one. Well, maybe they're watching it on the site. You never know. But I guess, Nate, any final thoughts? Penn State moves on to Villanova, a noon kick here at Beaver Stadium next week. This place was awesome tonight. The crowd was
so cool.
Everything that you would expect it to be, and I think maybe more. It was loud, it was engaged, and it made a difference tonight as Penn State. I don't think there were too many people that had them at 3-0 at this point in time.
I know one person who did.
I did as well, yes. So, absolutely. But there weren't many on that boat with us.
Smart,
but
Greg.
Yes. But here we are, 3-0, going into Villanova week. And look, this is one of the country's best football teams. There's simply no other. You can't, you know, after Wisconsin, you could say, oh, maybe Wisconsin lost it more than they wanted. I don't know if that's true, but you could have said it. You know, the Ball State game, oh, it's a MAC team. Well, now you beat a ranked, I know they probably won't be ranked on Monday, but a ranked SEC team that, again, they were ready for the challenge. And Penn State took care of it, took care of business, and moves on to Villanova.
One of the things that Sean Clifford said, and, like, there is no escaping how last year is directly tied to this year.
Right.
You can't separate the two. This year is about last year for this team. And so when Sean Clifford is asked, like, oh, how do you feel about your team? And he's talking about confidence. He's not talking about confidence in the sense of just like, oh, I feel better than I did last year about throwing the football. There's something to prove because last year was not a representative sample of what this team is, of who this team is, what this program is, what it wants to be. All of those different things are just ingrained, and it's like the subtext to everything that's happening so far this season. And it's going to be interesting to watch the rest of the way.
Absolutely. He's Nate Bauer. I'm Greg Pickel. You can read more bwi.rivals.com. Penn State goes into Beaver Stadium, a full Beaver Stadium, and wins 28-20, and we'll see you next week for Villanova.